Lawrence Real worked for former Governor Tony Anaya and former Senator Jeff Bingaman before serving as Chief Administrative Officer with the City of Albuquerque with 3 different mayors. Real went on to be Executive Director of the Mid-Region Council of Governments, then was appointed to the Federal Farm Services Agency by President Obama. His campaign has touted his government experience, where he has built up infrastructure and helped create jobs, and he has focused on diversifying the state's economy.
Lawrence Real, running for governor. Let's talk about the economy first. We have a two-edged sword in New Mexico, highest poverty rate in the nation, lowest job creation of any state since the recession. Now you talk a lot about creating jobs when you were city administrator of the city of Albuquerque, and you say you created thousands of jobs and you did recruit businesses such as Tempur-Pedic to the city. What exact role did you have in creating those jobs?
Well, I will tell you, I couldn't agree with you more. The citizens of New Mexico know that the economy is the most important issue, and jobs. Our people are leaving New Mexico, as we all know. Well, my role at the city of Albuquerque was to sit across the table and visit with CEOs of these companies and began to talk about why it's important to do work, to have them invest in New Mexico, what New Mexico has to offer in terms of its workforce, the quality of life issues, et cetera, that really help create opportunities for companies that are looking at cities to locate. So I've been there at the table, rolling up the sleeves, working with folks, making sure that you present the best opportunities for a company to locate to the community, in this case Albuquerque, but also about how do you make sure that you get other CEOs who are part of the business community to support that effort. Because make no mistake about it, CEOs talk to each other. They want to know about the environment. Is it really a great workforce? Is it a good place to do business? And once you get to that process and talking to others, you can rest assured that these companies are going to do their own homework. And my role was simply to make sure that we work together to provide them the best opportunities to locate in New Mexico and bring those jobs. And that's what we need to do today in New Mexico.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. That is, of course, economic development.
That's right.
And you have said you want to take a regional approach to that one size does not fit all. Talk to us a little about that.
Well, every region of New Mexico has some great assets to it. You know, where you look at the northern part of the state and you look at the cultural issues and the great vistas that we have and the great scenic landscapes, et cetera, like the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument that was established a couple of years ago. I was the president of the Green Chamber. We led the business effort to get that established. Why? Because it preserves the land and it creates jobs in northern New Mexico. That's northern New Mexico's assets. It's beautiful vistas, et cetera, and it's beautiful landscapes, and its tourism industry, which is important to the north. In the central area, we have the national labs, we have Los Alamos, and we have Sandia that can become great assets for this area and look at creating an ecosystem to create opportunities for young entrepreneurs to create jobs and grow their companies. In the southern part of the state, the border and the opportunities that we have to create what I call the gateway to Latin America. So regionalization is an important piece. When you get communities and regions to work together, it's an economy of scales in terms of the dollars that we need to invest in developing those plans, but it also creates opportunities for folks to work together. And that's what makes regions work, and that's why regional approaches make so much sense.
Well, let's talk about what we need in all the regions, though, and that's higher wages.
Right.
What are your thoughts on the minimum wage and how quickly, if you would raise it, first of all, and if you would, how quickly would you try to do that?
Well, we know that the disparity between wages is incredible. Again, another place that we lead the nation in the disparity of wages. We need to absolutely get to the 10-10, if you will, $10.10 an hour. I would certainly do that immediately in my first legislative session with the legislature, and then begin to create a structure in place where that wages is increased on a pro rata basis, if you will, based on either the index or whatever structure we end up agreeing to. But the point is that we need to move that issue forward very quickly. Families are dependent on making sure that they have enough money to grow to feed their children, to support their children and their families in New Mexico. And at this point, this governor has completely turned her back on those folks, and that's not right for New Mexico's families.
One more economic question, and quickly, but what about the tax structure in terms of attracting business? What are your thoughts Would you change that? If so, how?
I would tell you, Martha, what we need to do is go back and look at all the exemptions that we have given throughout the years on the gross receipts tax and have a very strong review and discussion about whether or not any of those exemptions are working for New Mexico. If we just did that alone, and this governor vetoed that several years ago and did not want to have a discussion, there's opportunities for us to look at whether or not those taxes make sense. And then look at what other opportunities we have available to create a stronger business climate in New Mexico and create opportunities for others to come in. But this piecemeal approach that we're doing now, where there's not a long-term policy for it, does nothing for New Mexico in the long term, and quite frankly, puts us in a competitive disadvantage on many of these issues because we're not looking at this holistically. We're looking at it one company at a time. We ought to be looking at our entire tax structure and looking at these exemptions and then coming back and having a real good discussion about what makes sense and where do we want to compete in New Mexico, given what we want to, who we want to attract to our state.
Now, talking about taxes, you have said that you think the gross receipts tax structure needs to be overhauled.
That's right.
But you have said, but let's not start with a tax on groceries. The implication is that Susana Martinez is in favor of that. Has she actually said that?
I don't know that she's actually said that, but I know that there's others who have, who are running for office today that have actually voted for that to occur. And my perspective is this, is that the food tax is not where you start. Again, you look at these exemptions. For example, we have exemptions on jet fuel, which was a process to create opportunities to bring in folks that were flying into Albuquerque and giving them an opportunity to create opportunities here. Well, you know, that may be one exemption that may not be serving New Mexico well. So I would say start with the exemptions, look at those in a holistic manner, and then look again, as I said earlier, look at where we want to compete, what are the issues, et cetera. But make sure that New Mexicans are not being saddled with additional taxes because we're trying to give exemptions to others who may or may not come.
We're going to move to the majority of voters, women. You have characterized the minimum wage as a women's issue, which it certainly is, because women are the majority making the minimum wage.
Right.
I want to ask you kind of a two-phase question here. What would you do about the gender pay gap in New Mexico, which is substantial? And where do you stand on reproductive choice? Because we don't find anything in your material on that.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, I truly believe that equal pay for equal worth, you know, for equal value. Women should be paid at the same rate as men. And what I would do is I would overhaul the state personnel system immediately to make sure that women in comparable jobs with men are paid equal, and that we begin to have that discussion even in the private sector to make sure that women are, that my daughter has the same opportunities to make the same amount of money that my son does, and for the equal work.
And the reproductive choices.
And reproductive choices, you know, on my perspective is that women have a right to make their own choices on reproductive issues, and I support women's right to make their own choices on that issue. Okay,
now let's move to education quickly. What about our lousy graduation rate? You talk about teacher pay a lot, but you really don't address the graduation rate directly. Tell us what you would do about that.
Well, first and foremost, our education system today is under attack by this administration. And my concern is that we're focused on the wrong things. We keep consistently wanting to focus in this administration on our teachers. What we really have to focus is on how do we keep our children in school? How do we make school relevant for them so that they can continue to graduate? And one is to invest in technology and to invest in other opportunities like vocational education and other programs. Not every child is going to be wants to go to college, and so we need to really become very active in that arena. Plus, I always also alternative schools for folks that drop out of the system are important for New Mexico.
Thank you. Now, pretty much let's wind up with this. You're second in fundraising, but you are still pretty far behind the front runner in the primary, and everybody is behind the governor, who has over $4 million already. So you've got less than a tenth of that, and you're tied for third in the polls. How are you going to win this election?
Well, I will tell you that it's about grassroots. It's about going out there and visiting with people out in the communities. We have had a very strong grassroots effort. We have a school bus that we retrofitted that we use to go out all over the state to talk to folks. We just went up on TV just today with our new our ad, our first campaign ad, and we're going to continue to have a grassroots effort. At the end of the day, it's about who votes and getting the word out to people in New Mexico. The money is important, no question about it, but I also have a long history of working in New Mexico. I know New Mexico very well, and I know New Mexico voters will remember the work that I have done and the many efforts that I've done that I've been involved with in New Mexico. So to me, it's about the grassroots effort, and it's about making sure that voters know there are some real choices here. The real choices is that you have another 4 years of the current administration, or you have someone elected to office, Lawrence Rael, who has done great things in New Mexico, has created opportunities, jobs, economic development, and will be focused on education and the future of our children.
Thank you, Lawrence Rael.
Thank you.